Okay, welcome everyone to the District 7930 Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee panel discussion. My name is David Hart, and I'm the chair of the District 7930 District Equity Inclusion Committee and your panel moderator. At this time, I also want to thank all of my fellow DEI committee members for their great efforts and commitment to the District DEI Committee this past year, and also putting this event together and all of our other events. So thank you once again for all your efforts. As the 2021 Rotary year comes to an end, the committee wanted to do one final DEI event. The goals of tonight's panel discussion is three parts. The first part is to provide valuable information and ideas that can help start and continue conversations in your individual clubs, communities, and districts on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues and initiatives. Provide and showcase some current DEI initiatives that clubs and districts are currently working on, and provide insight into current trends in the workplace, many of which are transferable to our clubs and districts. The flow of the evening is going to be like this. We're going to do a brief introduction of our panelists. We're going to, I as the moderator will ask some questions, and then what we'll do is we will stop our recording and we will open it up to questions of our participants that are here. So in doing a little bit of research for the evening, I came across a couple of some DEI quotes that I thought were thought-provoking and appropriate for the evening. First one is from an unknown source. Being politically correct is about looking good to others. Being inclusive is about being good. Another quote that I found was, a diverse mix of voices leads to better discussions, decisions, and outcomes for everyone. And that was from Sundar Pichal. A report on inclusive decision-making by Cloverpop showed some impressive results. Inclusive teams make better business decisions up to 87% of the time, and decisions made are executed by diverse teams delivered 60% better results. Why? Because different perspectives are valuable. While you may feel more comfortable working with people who share your background or opinions, collaborating with people who don't look, talk, or think like you can stretch you to think more critically and creatively. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just introduce each of the panelists and just read a very brief bio and their background. So our first panelist is Bill Paulson. He is a realtor with Keller Williams in Needham. He has been a member of the Rotary Club of Needham since 2004 and has been a club president twice, and is now currently the chair of the Rotary District 7910 Social Equity Task Force. Welcome, Bill. Our second panelist is Cecilia Akufo. Cecilia is an experienced talent acquisition professional whose experience includes working in human resources in higher education and as a technical recruiter for Modus. Modus is the IT placement division for Adecco, one of the world's largest staffing agencies. Cecilia also hosts and produces the podcast Workplace Fairness and Dignity. Earl Miller, welcome Earl. Welcome Cecilia also. Earl Miller is a Greater Newburgh Rotary Club member, former Rotary Club president, and two-term assistant governor. He leads the Rotary District 7210 Think Differently DEI team. And Lexi Kantor, who is a co-committee member of the District 7930 DEI Committee. She's a Boston Rotaract Club member and a human resources professional for Ovia Health. Welcome, Lexi. So I'm going to start off, and I will start off with the first question, and the question is to all four panelists. And if you would just, whoever wants to start, feel free. But the question number one is, briefly tell us about yourself and what DEI projects are you currently working on today? And I guess I'll start with Lexi.
Awesome, thanks, David. Hi, everybody. I am super excited to be here. I'm working on DE&I projects through a couple of different parts of my life. So of course, I sit on the DE&I committee for District 7930, which has been really awesome to help an organization that I love continue to grow and open up and become more inclusive so that we can invite more people to join. So we've been working on putting on awesome events like this. We also created a DE&I citation, which is a checklist of sorts for clubs to follow to sort of become or start down the path of becoming more diverse and inclusive. So that's been a really exciting project this year. And then in my professional life, I am the HR person for my company of about 90 people. And one of my responsibilities is to sort of run and execute the DE&I program and initiative company-wide. So it's a company-wide effort, but I'm sort of responsible and accountable for it. So I run a council. I make sure that leadership has goals and KPIs dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion that are tied to our bonuses, and sort of overall, to use a word that one of our former speakers used, Jim Lapata, operationalizing inclusion and making sure it's built into our culture and our process, which I'm excited to talk about today as well.
Great, thanks, Lexi. Earl.
My name is Earl Miller. Tell us briefly about yourself and what DEI projects you are currently working on. I'm one of my DEI projects. You have to be able to walk the talk. And my experience with cross-cultural competencies actually started in my childhood. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and the civil rights movement, particularly the SCLC, Dr. King's work, Dr. Abernathy, was sort of part of my community. And I was a member of the generation to walk through those doors that were open. And one of the things one of my first lessons related to DEI was that just because a door is open doesn't necessarily mean you're welcomed. So having been in that situation, I've sort of developed an awareness. And over the years, that's been a pursuit of creating environments where people were welcome and they were able to take advantage of opportunities. I was involved in higher education for about 25 years as an administrator. I had the great fortune of having the opportunity to be involved in an experiment that helped to create one of the nationally recognized institution for its cultural and ethnic diversity, not only among students, but also faculty and staff. I was involved in not only hiring, recruiting, but also in terms of creating a campus environment and a institutional culture to accommodate those goals. Since retiring, almost 4 years ago now, I've been involved in community work related to DEI initiatives, both working with non-for-profits, doing trainings, doing consulting with the development of programs. And I now I was asked this year to chair our district DEI committee. We are called Think Differently, Rotary Think Differently Committee. We are part of the Grow Rotary initiative for our district. And I work with a team of 8 very committed and passionate people who want to see Rotary continue to grow. And we believe that DEI is a very important part of the future of Rotary.
Thanks, Earl. Cecilia.
So I'm Cecilia Kufo, and I'll speak from a recruiting and hiring perspective because that's a lot of my background as well. But I believe a lot of what I talk about today can be transferred into recruiting membership. So even though I'll refer to, employment, I think it can apply. So who I am is I worked in human resources for 8 years or more, recently as a talent acquisition manager. I was in the position for approximately a year after I'd been recruited from my previous employer where I wasn't looking. I was working for a university, really enjoying my job, but somebody gave me an opportunity where they it gave me an opportunity to grow. So I left and went to the job. About a year after I had been there, about a month after I received a really great performance review, I was fired. And it was 2 months after speaking up about abusive and bullying behavior on the job by my supervisor. And the boss and the administration, the people who had to sign off on it, tried to silence me immediately and to bury my story. So I decided to tell as many people as I could that I got fired. I wanted to tell them why I got fired so that I could call attention to such behaviors which are not unusual in the workplace today. So I created my own broadcast channel. I taught myself how to produce a podcast, and I launched it this year in January, put it on the internet. And the title of my podcast is Workplace Fairness and Dignity. And it looks at the normalization of poor employee treatment that's prevalent in the workplace. I do think bullying in the workplace is tied to how successful you can be with diversity efforts as well. So those are things that I talk about in my podcast. Abusive and bullying behavior strip people of their dignity and respect, which is not what people sign up for when they take a job. And on the podcast, I look at organizations that promote employee fairness and dignity, basically in exchange for hard work and the opportunity to earn a living without abuse. And I'm going to talk about some of what I've learned about bullying and the connection to diversity. I'm going to talk about what I've learned in doing research for my podcast as we go along.
Great, thank you, Cecilia. And Bill.
Thanks for having me here. It's an amazing group of people. I do not have a long history of working in the DEI space, and I guess I was one of the people energized somewhat through the events of the last couple of years, with including the murder of George Floyd. And there are a number of things that sort of brought me from a place where I kind of understood that there was a problem out there to a place where I felt like I really needed to get involved in this and help to make a difference. And my company started a social equity task force, and I reached out to our district governor, and I was like, what are we doing in this space? Because it seemed like a lot of organizations were starting to think about it. And she said, well, nothing. And I said, well, is it all right if I started one? And then we've been shamelessly stealing from David and all of his good efforts. We created a web page for our district site that kind of looks like the one in 7930. And we created a DEI citation and gave that out to a half a dozen clubs or so at the district assembly this year, which was great. We even created a fun logo for it. So that's a little bit who I am. A really fun project that we have just wrapped up as the Needham Club is a diversity book fair. So working with the Frugal Bookstore in Roxbury, we help the teachers in our community, elementary teachers, create wish lists of books from a list of books that was provided by the Frugal Bookstore. And the goal of the project was to diversify the set of books in the classrooms at all the schools. So we did the 5 elementary schools plus the Catholic elementary school. And we also worked with the Joseph Tynan School in South Boston. That's a school that we've been supporting for the past couple of years in various ways. And our hope is that every child will be able to see themselves in the books that they read at school. And as part of that project, we raised, we had about $8,000 worth of books purchased for the schools, which was a great start. And I'm hopeful that we've created a system and a model now with the Frugal Bookstore where other clubs could just follow our lead and copy what we did, kind of like what we do with the dictionary project and the reality fair and other trees for the 4th grade foresters and things like that.
Thanks, Bill. So question number 2. And as Rotarians, we all know about this, but based on the Rotary 4-way test, is it the truth? Is it fair to all? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? Keeping that in mind as the basis, why do our clubs and districts need to embrace DEI initiatives? And Earl, I'll start with you. Oh, you're muted, Earl.
We have a saying with our committee, DEI or DIE. We believe that it's important for Rotary. You mentioned the downturn in participation within service organizations across the board. And obviously there's a disconnect between the traditional model and the current expectations of the next wave of adults in our society. Baby boomers are no longer the largest population, adult population in the country. It's now millennials. We also have Xers and Zers. They are generations that are looking for a more inclusive society, realized in places like where they work, but also where they choose to be involved for both social as well as community service opportunities. So that's why we believe that DEI is important. I think also Rotary is a humanitarian organization, and it's a diverse organization. I mean, when you look at the fact that 1.2 million plus members worldwide, we have to be who we say we are. And I think that's another disconnect that DEI helps in terms of internal reality and a way of defining who we are so that we can more clearly be seen by our communities and embraced by our communities. A lot of people don't know about Rotary because there's no reason for them to care about Rotary, because possibly they feel maybe Rotary doesn't care about them.
Thanks, Bill. Earl, I'm sorry. Cecilia, same question.
Yeah, so the consulting group McKinsey & Company says that diversity on executive teams creates a likelihood of what they call company outperformance. But I feel like there are ways of creating inclusivity, not just in terms of race, but also disability, military service with veterans, gender identity. And I also think inclusivity is about who gets to give input, who gets to have a voice. We're familiar with people with many meetings where the same voices are picked on to speak and get their ideas heard. And it's important that leaders allow all voices to be heard and to pay attention to non-leaders. That is also inclusivity. It will give opportunities for more ideas, for ideas that may be better, regardless of what level a person is at in an organization. That's inclusivity, regardless of the current makeup of the organization. Regarding diversity on a micro level, speaking again with inclusivity in meetings, I think leadership can give opportunity to people who have something to share, but they may not want to say something because their boss is there. I think top leadership can provide permission, but the climate needs to be there where people don't feel like they're going to be punished or censored by their supervisor when they speak up and provide their input. And the company I got recruited from to this last company, one of the last things I said to the vice president before I left is, you're calling on too many of the same people. The people at a lower level don't really get an opportunity to give input. And I think you're missing a lot of really good ideas. So that's one reason to be inclusive in any way that you can, beyond, even if it's at a small level where you're talking about a lower level employee. That's inclusivity, and it's important to the strength of the organization.
Thanks, Cecilia. Bill.
Right. So, Rotary, if you look at Rotary with our 33,000 clubs and 1.2 million members, you look at a picture in your mind, a picture from the international conference, right? We may be the most diverse organization in the planet, right? Like there's people in all different countries, all different types of backgrounds involved in this organization. So, you know, we start out from that place, which is amazing. And for over 100 years, we have been helping to promote peace through understanding worldwide, right? So we send ambassadorial scholars abroad and they do their thing and they learn about another culture and they take their culture to that country. We do the group study exchange kind of things and vocational exchanges. We, you know, there's all sorts of examples of places in our culture where we bring two organizations to, or two cultures together and try and help them understand each other to promote peace. And really it's time for us to do that in our own communities, right? There's people that our culture is sort of diverging some, and I think Rotary could help to bring that culture back together. And how amazing would it be if we had, you know, there's not 33,000 clubs in the United States, but if we had every club in the United States working on these concepts and making a difference in their community, that would be unbelievable. We could really move the needle, I think, if we got Rotary engaged in this the way we've been engaged in polio and other efforts in the past.
Thanks, Bill. Lexi.
Yeah, I echo everything that everybody already said. I think I completely agree. And I was trying to think of how I might be able to add value with an answer. And I think there's sort of a more subtle way that the four-way test applies here as well, which is just like in our meetings and in our clubs and the way that our clubs you know, just do life day to day and what the processes look like and what the leadership transitions look like. There's an opportunity for all of us to sort of build inclusion and belonging into those pieces of Rotary a lot more. And I think that really speaks to like, is it fair to all concerned? I think typically a lot of what we do in Rotary is very tradition based. And for many years, we did a lot of our traditions very unintentionally without sort of thinking about whether or not they were fair and beneficial to all concerned. And so I think that's another piece of, you know, why I think it's so important to invest in DE&I initiatives in Rotary. And to sort of quote Earl, I actually wrote this down to quote what Earl said earlier, just because a door is open doesn't necessarily mean someone feels welcome. So I think that's something that's so important. And in order to make ourselves as clubs fair and beneficial to all concerned and to continue to build goodwill, it's important for us to look at our practices and the way that we build our communities through a DE&I lens, so that we can ensure that everything we're doing is inclusive and fair to all concerned.
Thank you, Lexi. Question number 3, and this is more on a I guess a micro level. What can our members do to become more diverse, inclusive, and equitable within their clubs? And Lexi, I'm going to put you on the spot because you started speaking a little bit more about that. And if you would kind of just continue.
Sure, yeah. So I think, right, like there's two sides of this, in my opinion. There's the sort of systemic and administrative side to this, and then there's the individual side, right? So all of us can go forth from this meeting into our own clubs and start making change from the bottom up. We can, I think that it was Bill's point from earlier, right? Like we can continue to build peace through understanding in our own communities and really try to understand, you know, on a human level, the needs of the communities that we're serving, understand the folks who are different and look different from us in our clubs, invite somebody that doesn't look like you to come to a meeting. Those types of things are things that we can do super easily individually. But then the way that sticks is if you move it to a systematic level. So if you get the leadership of your district and your club involved and make sure that they are downloading our DE&I citation and thinking really critically about, do we pray at meetings? Who is that excluding? What is that? How does that feel for somebody who might not practice religion and might not be looking for a community that practices religion? That's just a small example, right? What does our pay structure look like? Could somebody with an hourly job stop working in the middle of the day to come to a meeting and pay for a lunch at a country club, right? And so I think those are the types of things to think critically about when we're thinking about diversifying our membership, and then also making sure that the folks who do come for a meeting stay for more meetings, because at the systematic level and at the leadership level, which is what Cecilia was alluding to earlier as well, Rotary is continuing to be built for everybody rather than just being built for the same group and trying to like squeeze other people in.
Great, thank you. Cecilia.
You know, I was going to say this. I have some points that Lexi made, but I couldn't make them as eloquently as she did. So what I will say is, what I would say is, you know, how do people look at, and again, speaking from an employment perspective, which can translate, how do your people in the organization look at diversity efforts? What do they consider diversity to mean? How do they perceive the word? I've been to conferences, including those focused on academic recruiting of professors and other academics. And numerous times I've heard about the challenge of working with people on hiring committees that suggest that to find and hire diverse candidates, they must be willing to lower their standards. So if the mindset is that excellence and diversity don't go together, that's a problem. So it's important to really have a conversation. We assume that we're all on the same page, and not necessarily. So that's something I'd like to just put out there.
Thanks. Bill?
Right, so I guess I've been doing social equity task force presentations around our district. I've done about 20 of them now. And when I go to do a presentation, I do research on the town and the community where the club is operating. And you'd be amazed, actually, if you Google the name of your town, diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's all sorts of information that's going to pop up. There's companies hiring DEI executives. There's schools, school systems and universities that are hiring DEI executives. There's DEI organizations in your community. And as a club, connecting with our community is always a way of increasing our membership, right? So these are, in a lot of cases, these executives are new to the community. And it's an awesome opportunity to reach out and welcome a new business person in our community and say, hey, we're Rotary. We care about this stuff. We'd love to have you come join us. So I think that's a way to build your membership and increase diversity of the membership all at the same time.
Great, thanks, Bill. Earl? Unmute.
How are we doing now?
Perfect.
Okay. There's a quote I came across a couple of days ago. It's by William Faulkner. And he wrote, we cannot force someone to hear a message they are not ready to receive. But we must never underestimate the power of planting seeds. And one of the things that we started to do, by the way, I want to give props to the 7930 DEI committee. David, we spoke because our committee researched what was going on in Rotary with DEI. We came across your website, your committee's website, and we were really impressed. We were saying that's what we want to be when we grow up. So it's a real privilege to be here today. But we started out interviewing DEI professionals, vice presidents of major corporations, DEI specialists in industries, in education, from the community. And one of the things they talked about was the process of enlightening, educating, inspiring others to become more aware and maybe better locate themselves as it related to DEI. I think that's the first step. Being able to reflect and locate oneself in terms as it relates to the issues with DEI or the issues or elements of DEI. I give this example in my presentations to fellow Rotarians. Rather than looking externally to find untapped pools of potential Rotarians based on what we think. What have we asked ourselves? Who do we believe should be a Rotarian? Because that impacts who you're looking for.
Right.
Is it someone with familiar ethnic, cultural, generational, spiritual life experience and personal values? Is it someone that we're looking to know and understand us rather than our willingness to learn more about and understanding them? Matter of fact, what I would say is this: if there was a 3-step process, self-reflection, and then secondly, action, which would involve, okay, looking around, as Bill mentioned, seeing the demographics of your community, who's there, who's missing from the table, and then being intentional, because diversity happens only when people are intentional about creating diversity. So going out into the community and bringing in people who look different, people from different experiences, people who are missing, and then finding out from them what creates a welcoming environment, what enables them to jump in and to contribute the value of diversity that we all talk about.
Thanks, Earl. So I had a 4th question for the panelists, and most of the answers that everybody gave on question number 3 basically covered question number 4, which is what can districts do? And most of you have mentioned districts and things along those lines. So I'm going to throw just a slight curveball at everybody. Lexi brought up a very good, she used a term, and this is a term that has been resonating with me for quite a long time. And so I'm going to ask the question, in the DEI arena, how would you define belonging? And what does belonging mean to you? Because this has come up in our committee meetings. This has come up in some of our other webinar events that we've done. So I'm going to open it up. I'm going to open it up actually first to Cecilia, because I want to get her perspective on her workplace perspective. But a lot of our clubs, we're business people. We work in business. We may own our own business, things along those lines. And whether we realize it or not, oftentimes what I see in clubs is some of our business practices that we're taking from the office or from the company over to our club. So Cecilia, in the kind of on the idea of workplace bullying and not having a comfortable environment or an inclusive environment, what does belonging mean to you?
What Earl said resonated from the beginning. A lot of it is that for me. Just because the door is open doesn't mean that you're welcome there. And I absolutely relate to that. Sometimes, let me tell you, often organizations promote diverse hiring, right? Belonging is making sure people feel like they're welcome there. When organizations promote diverse hiring, but they have a problematic environment, and then they recruit individuals who are new to the environment, it doesn't look anything like, let's just go with the obvious, like the typical hires. What are the chances that something's going to go wrong? Because what happens is, let's say you have an example of an organization that tolerates employee bullying. You bring someone in that's different. What could go wrong? And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I worked somewhere where a senior level employee was recruited into a division in our company. That particular division had a lot of problems. They had high employee turnover. They had some bullying going on. The employees were seen as disposable, not a valuable asset. They recruited an incredibly talented African-American male from the South to work in that division, which had always struggled with diversity. Before long, one of his peers who's not used to working with someone like him at his level resisted his authority, and students started painting him as an aggressive, unprofessional, threatening male. Now it goes back to the environment that he came to. This person was the utmost professional Southern gentleman. The person who recruited him left, and the new leader recognized and acknowledged what was happening to him and recognized that it was biased, but she was limited in what she could do. The problems were so widespread. They spent a lot of money to recruit him. He made sacrifices to move here, but ultimately he was really not made to feel like he belonged, because there were no ground rules dealing with the behavior, and saying, certain things are not acceptable. So eventually left the organization, went back to a more familiar environment, and he went back down south. Now, what should have happened is leadership should have taken the temperature and done something about the issues, instead of just putting someone in somewhere where they could be set up for failure, because it's not just about bullying, it's about how other people see other people that are different. And if they're inclined to treat human beings not well, chances are they're not going to take kindly to somebody who comes in that they're not used to, that, and they replicate the behavior with this other person. So I don't know if that helps, but.
No, it does. Thank you, Cecilia. Bill.
Yeah, so I think belonging is something that we've been dealing with for a long time as Rotary clubs. We're a small family in general. It's like a typical club is 30 people or so. And, we get together, and pre-COVID, we get together, we have lunch, everybody chats with each other, and you sort of get to know them and their families. But a new person coming in, it's kind of overwhelming. We do a lot of different service projects every year. A lot of them just kind of happen, and we just do them, and a new person is like, oh, well, why did that happen? Or how did that happen? And there's really not there hasn't been, at least in our club, a good way of helping to get them involved in making them feel like they belong. And I think that's something we could all do better, probably, is when somebody new joins. I think the personal thing we do pretty well at, as we're all pretty good people, but then helping them feel like they belong in the club, give them a task to work on, or talk to them about what they're interested in, and maybe do a project that means something to them, rather than, and this isn't, anybody that's new to the club, what's their passion, and how can we do something that, plays into that. I think our club is actually incredibly fluid, and that's one of the things I've always welcomed about our club is, if you have an idea of something you want to do and you bring it up to the board, most of the time they're just gonna say, okay, let's go. And helping new people, whatever their background, to belong, in part, is helping them to feel like they're doing service that matters to them.
Thanks, Bill. Earl, if you could kind of touch a little bit on belonging.
Let's talk about the people who, the potential Rotarians who are out there somewhere. How do we bring them in? How do we help them to feel welcome and as if they belong? Here's my formula for a successful Rotary club. In terms of the way it's perceived by the community, it's relevant. It's welcoming in the sense of being a good neighbor. So it offers the potential partnership in a number of different ways, alliances, and then it's involved in engaging strategic projects and programs. The footprint of an organization that's involved in meaningful work within the community. Again, particularly in terms of the generational divide. I don't know about you guys. We looked at the demographics of our district, 7210, and we were shocked to learn. Sometimes the numbers tell the story. And it was only like almost 70% reporting, but of the clubs that reported, almost 20%, 25% or more of our membership are over 70. Less than 10% of the membership of the clubs reporting under 40. Not good.
Not good demographics, no.
Not good.
Definitely not.
I wonder what other clubs look like in other parts of the country. So again, I think people are involved in Rotary for two reasons, and people will want to be involved in Rotary for primarily two reasons. That it's an organization, it's a community, a network of men and women who want to do good and have fun.
Thanks, Earl.
And we can create an environment where everyone has that opportunity. Then we create a win-win situation.
Thank you. And Lexi.
Yeah, I have a really brief story about this. So I've been involved in Rotary since I was in high school. I like to joke that it changed my life. I got introduced to RILA after I had moved to a new state, a new high school. I didn't have a lot of friends. I was very shy. And I got to go to RILA, which is the Rotary Youth Leadership Awards. And it just completely took me out of my shell. I made a ton of friends. I learned what leadership and service meant. I built a relationship with my local Rotary Club. And I started an Interact Club in my high school. So this was my life, my junior and senior year. And of course I was talking about it all the time. My mom knew all about it. And I was like, Mom, like, you're a business person in the community. This club has made me feel so welcome. And like, I found a home here and it's just so wonderful. Like, you should join a club. And she was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. So she went to a different club than the one that I had built a relationship with as a visitor for a meeting. And within the first 10 minutes of the meeting, someone had made an anti-Semitic joke, and we're Jewish. And nobody said anything, nobody called it out, it just like happened. Some people laughed. And my mom was immediately turned off, and she came back home after the meeting and was like, I just had such a like icky experience. I don't think I want to go back. And I was shocked that this organization that had made me feel like I belonged so much left her feeling like she did not have a place there. So I think that sort of sums up nicely what belonging feels like. I think it's very emotional. It's very personal and anecdotal. And so that's why it's so important to be intentional about making sure folks feel like they belong. And making sure that folks feel like the space in the community is made for them and for everybody else, and is willing to grow for them and with them as well.
Thank you,
Can I be
Lexi.
able to say something to follow up what Lexi?
Please, Cecilia.
That's an awesome example. The one thing I feel like often tends to happen is because people feel like they think a certain way and it's obvious what the rules are. The rules aren't obvious to everyone. You would think that people know how they should behave and what's appropriate. Sometimes, even if they know, people will sometimes do what they can get away with. And it's really important, I believe, to set the tone in organizations and companies and say, and take the temperature. Like, let's have a conversation, whether you figuring out how people think about diversity. Let people know this is what we agree on, that's acceptable and what's not, because I think people do walk in and say, well, of course everybody else thinks like me. And you're not going to find out that they don't think like you, because they're going to target the person that, that they don't think belongs. So, and that person may just leave and you have no idea why. So I just think these things are important. And it may seem like you're talking down to people to say, hey, to have a conversation, but think about how the person feels that walks into a setup, where they don't realize how they're going to be treated. So for what it's worth, I really think it's important that everybody agree on the ground rules and understand what those rules are when you're bringing in members, in your groups and in the workplace.
So I want to thank our panelists. If I may, I'd like to add just one additional thing to belonging that happened on my end, not relatively recently. In my organization, we were doing a hiring veteran training, and what should our hiring managers look for when they're reviewing resumes, different, types of questions to ask and all of that type of stuff, and some of the different statistics. And one of the most interesting statistics that came out of this is that when a veteran leaves the military, about 70 to 80% of them will land in a job and the average amount of time that they spend at that job is less than 2 years, because it is that first job. It's kind of like when you graduate high school or college, you get that first job, and in today's workplace, many workers have multiple careers in their lifetime, in their work life. But there are organizations out there that have actively and put out really great vibes for veterans to feel belonging in those organizations. But it's alarming to say that, that they're only going to stay for less than 2 years. So that's that sort of get by job until you can find the better job or the perfect job or whatever it might be. And organizations need to decide when they're recruiting, are we that way station, shall we say, or are we the place to be that somebody wants to progress in their career and things along those lines. And clubs are, and I think Rotary clubs can, and in some cases can be the same thing. Are we that type of club that is opening, welcoming, that somebody does feel belonging, that that you're making a difference, and that your opinion, where you come from, is respected, it's understood, it's listened to, etc. So at this point, what we're going to do is, and we ran over a little bit, and I do apologize to our listeners, but I think our panelists had some really, really great answers and some great input. But we're going to end the recording now. I want to once again thank